What's going on, everybody? Gar Hoover here, and today we're going to be going through my track Toucan, which I made on the PO-33. And it's kind of just this tropical lo-fi track. If you have yet to listen to it, check it out up here. And if you want to grab the samples, you can grab those down below in the description. And with that being said, let's just jump right into breaking down this track.
Alright, so we are back at the murder table, ready to break down another beat. Today it's Toucan. Here are the samples for it. The xylophone sound I made in Vital, bass sound I made in Massive, flute sound I made in Vital, and down here, got the chords, made these in Vital as well. And how I get those chopped up sounds is actually the PO-33 chopped up these chords, and I had to lengthen with the trim knob the length of each of these chords so they ring out. And then you get those nice chops to it. We also have our jungle sounds, which I just took straight up from YouTube. And then we got our drum kit. Very lo-fi. Pretty much when I was making these samples, I just removed all the top end, so you get that more relaxed feel that goes with lo-fi music. So that's the samples. Now let's take a look at the intro. Alright, let's listen to the intro. Alright, that's all it is. Pretty simple. This introduces some themes to us. First off, it's going to have more of that tropical feel with the jungle in the background, so let's just talk about that real quick. All I do is have it ringing out. I trimmed it so it's the full sample. And what I did was, starting with each pattern, just triggered it once on the first step, and it just loops right through. And so when it loops, too, it kind of gives it a rhythm. It familiarizes us with it, and we start to hear all the different rhythms from the birds that kind of play into it as it repeats. And then it repeats again for the second pattern, and then it jumps back to the first pattern. And then it goes to the third pattern, which is the final chord. And the birds cut out completely on 15. And that's because I made a choke. You can't even hear anything because what I did was I took it and I went to trim and I made it as short as it can possibly go and went to the very end of the sample so that there's that instance of dead air at the very end behaves as a choke. So I can stop the sample whenever I want and it's not going to trail on into the next pattern. And you hear those little clicks from the drum kit that kind of really add that transition like, yep, this is about to be a lo-fi track. So let's take a look next at the chords, because these chords kind of stay the same almost throughout the entire verse section, even into the chorus in some ways, at least rhythmically. So let's start with pattern 1. So all you're hearing is that's all it's really doing is open, kind of doing this choke sound. So let me show you. First pattern, it's ringing out. This is the only place where we hear the larger held out chord. And then we have those smaller hits, which we see are on 4, 10, and 13. And then we have an alternate of the same thing that's a little bit quieter. You hear that? And that's just because of how it chopped. But that adds variation, adds some human feel to it instead of it feeling like a sample that's triggered constantly that could give it more of a machine feel. Makes it feel a lot more natural, which is important for lo-fi. And the second pattern has a similar rhythm that's going on, except instead of having just a little hit on 4, we introduce one on 7 as well that rings out. And it's the same sound here for 4 and 12. And that rhythm is actually the exact same for the third pattern, which has, because the second and the third pattern behave as alternates. So your first pattern, it loops, it's the start of the first pattern technically, and then it goes to pattern 2, and then it goes back to pattern 1, and then pattern 3. So 2 and 3 have the same rhythms but different chords, and you'll hear that. So obviously there's a little bit of a variation at the end here, but it has the double longer chord held out. It's got those double hits that kind of are more reminiscent to the first pattern. So it goes, for those chill hits, we have 4, 12, 10, and 13. And then we got those little clicks that come from the drums, which we're going to take a look at real quick. Also, just for context, this song is at 84 BPM, and it's got some swing to it. So how you get swing is you hold down BPM and you twist this knob right here. This one adjusts the BPM speed, and this one is swing. So I'm not going to mess with the swing just so I don't jack it up. Usually I keep it at swing 4 or 5, which isn't too drastic, but it still adds good feel. And what that does is it swings the second vertical column and the fourth vertical column in our sequences, which you'll hear when we play them out. Alright, so let's take a look at the drums. Drums are really simple, really. Same thing for most of the patterns. So we've got these hi-hats, or not hi-hats, shakers. And where the snare would be, we have the deeper shaker. So we have the going on there. And that's the same for pattern 2. And then we just have that click sound on 15 and 16. And as you can tell, it's the same sound. It's illuminated for both steps, except I adjusted the pitch of the first one so you have it go high and then it drops down. So that's what's going on for the intro. This really introduces us to kind of some themes like the chords and that it's going to be a lo-fi track. And with that being said, let's take a look at the verse. Alright, so let's take a listen to the verse now. Alright, so you can hear that's a pretty long loop that's going on there. So let's start first with the drums, because the drums really capture that lo-fi feel really well in this. So it's pretty much the same pattern for the most part for every single one of these patterns, or same sequence I should say. So what we've got going on are our kicks on 1, 9, and 8. But notice, as I always do, one of these is layered with the high or the shaker, one of these is not. And what I'm using is the one without it, because technically what I wanted is just the shaker to be hitting on the third vertical row, which kind of gives us that offbeat feel, which I was just doing with my mouth there. So these other hits then, when we think about the kick here and the kick here, are pretty standard spots for a kick on 1 and 9, and the snare right here. This on the 8 right here kind of adds that lo-fi beat. So if you were ever considering what is a lo-fi beat on the pocket operator, this is what you want to punch in for your kicks. 1, 8, 9, and you're good to go. Not too busy with the kicks, very simple, very easy. And our snares are just on 5 and 13, nothing too crazy there. And then we've got our shaker, which is going 3, 7, 11, 15, down this vertical third row, which I said gives it that offbeat feel. And then we've got pattern number 5. So you can already hear this has a little bit of a difference going on with it. So we got the kick right here. We got the kick on 1, and now it's on 12. But there's another kick that's at play here, and that's the layered kick, and we have that on 7. So it's 1, 7, and 12 now for the kicks. And the snare is still rocking 5 and 13, doesn't change the whole song. And we've got that deeper shaker on 9 instead of the kick. And then we have our shaker, the standard shaker here and here. And then we've got on 15 and 16, those spray can samples, which are pretty simple. All I did was just punch it in like that. And the key was just having everything cut out right at that point, and it just lets that sample really stand out, that little spray can vibe. And same thing for the drums for this one. These are the exact same as the first pattern. Pattern 4 and pattern 6 are the exact same for drums. The only difference is between these two patterns is just a variation in the melody. Everything else about them is the same. And that kind of goes for 7 and 8, as these are the ending patterns of the 4-bar or the 4-pattern loop. And this one's the variation that transitions into the chorus, and this one's the one that loops back around. So let's start with 7. And once again, this has a pretty similar kick to the original pattern that we looked at, 1, 8, 9, and the shaker going down to this vertical row, except to 15 and 16. We've got those two high-pitched clicks, the one click that's higher than the other, which we heard originally in the intro. And we also have the snare hits going on right here, and the kicks, as I said. Now let's take a look at pattern 8. Exact same. The drums are the exact same for that. And so now let's take a look at the chords, which honestly, I don't even think they change that much, but I just want to be thorough. I really don't notice any difference. No, there's no difference. So chords are the exact same as what we heard in the intro, so that's great. I don't have to cover that. The thing that we do hear for the first time here is the melody and the bass line, both of which are kind of busy, but let's start with that flute melody because it's a little chiller. So we're just introducing ourselves to this melody. Once again, for lo-fi, melodies can be a little distracting, and it just kind of makes it more. Everyone said this song sounded like it was from Animal Crossing. I fully agree. I listen to a lot of Nintendo music, so definitely it's just going to come out in my creative process. I love melodies. I think they're important. So all I'm really doing is just kind of having, instead of it being super, super straight, it's kind of got that swung feel to it. I'm not going to break down all the notes, but really with lo-fi music, you don't want it to be super straight in the rhythms. Instead of being like 1, 2, 3, 4, you hear that this melody is kind of playful. It's bouncing around. It captures the vibe really well. And so you hear there the difference in the melody from the first pattern. So it has this additional note on 15, which transitions into, and then here's the alternate version of that. So this pattern technically should only be 4 pattern, or this portion of the song, the verse, should only be 4 patterns long, but I'm using 5 total to kind of add some variation and some feel to it that kind of keeps the loop not as monotonous and you don't get tired of it as quickly because you're hearing these variations in the melody that keeps you interested. And that's something, if you have spare patterns like I did when I was making this, I was like, you know what, let's add some variation to the verse melody because it was kind of just repeating itself and really boring. So I decided to make some variations in it just to keep the ear interested as we went through the verse. And the other thing you hear in the background if you have headphones on is the bass line, which is just walking around the chords that are being played. So in the first pattern, it's really simple actually. It's only just, it's following the rhythm of the chords that were being played, and it's just sticking to the root note. But we hear that it's being cut off. So it's ringing out normally. And what's going on when we do this, it's ringing out, but then this one, I'm holding down the note and I'm cutting down the loop length to 1. So now it's going to just last 1 step. And it cuts off right with the snare. So it has this really tight groove to it. And all of these are the same way. 1 step, 1 step, 1 step. And if we go to the second pattern, we get a little bit more of a variation going on. So we have this, it goes the root of the chord, and then it jumps up a little bit. I don't believe that's... Oh, it is an octave. But you can hear, once again, we shorten the loop length, or not loop length, excuse me, just the length of the sample to only 1 step. And then this one is the variation of the first pattern, so I decided to have the bass line, like, because if someone was playing this naturally, they're going to get bored of playing just the root. And so the second time through, I decided to add some variation. So you have all these are the same, but then we're starting to get... So now we're coming back around to the final pattern of the first time through. And this, if the bass player is coming around, he's like, all right, I've been just playing root notes the whole time, this is getting boring. They're going to still have some root notes to kind of define what the chord is, but we hear some other variation. So we hear it jump up to, I believe it's the 5th and an octave above. So that just kind of adds some fun feel to it, and you can hear the same thing going on in that repeat of the pattern with just the melodic change. So that's going to do it for the verses. Now let's take a look at the chorus. Alright, so let's listen to the chorus. Let me punch it in. Let it loop around twice just so you can hear all the stuff that's kind of going on there. Other than that melody, you can hear the bass line is going absolutely wild if you've got headphones on. But let's start with the chords, because there is a chord change here. We're introduced to this chord, which I can't even remember what it was when I was punching it in, but what's on the 14th step of the pattern. And notice that the chords aren't doing their bum bum, those little stops. Now they're just ringing out because it's the chorus. We're going to try and keep a constant presence and a dynamic change. So what this means then is it just goes... You'll hear that. But then when we jump to this second pattern, That sounds pretty familiar to a style and pattern that we've heard already in the verses, and it is. You've got the choke on the 4 and the 8, and then it ringing out on the 1 and the 7. So nothing too crazy going on there, and then it jumps back to this, ringing out, and then the alternate, which is a different chord, but the rhythm is the same, 1 and 7, and then the chokes on 4 and 12. So chords are really simple, but it's just the voicings I selected and just kind of like the rhythm that's going on that makes them interesting and has that real lo-fi feel to it. Let's take a look at the drums now, because the drums do have additional energy in this section. So originally in that first section we had only the shaker on the first vertical row, but with this kick you can already hear that the shaker, I layered it on top of it when I made the samples and put them into the PO-33. So now we're going to have the shaker on this vertical row and this vertical row. So you're going to get that 8th note shaker groove. So you have that steady hit going on, but you hear some other things happening too. So we have that deeper shaker hit right here on 2, so it adds that additional, kind of throws you off a little bit, almost like a offbeat, off kilter feel to it. But then you also hear, instead of just the shaker, we've got an open hi-hat that rings out for 3 and 4 and then gets cut off once the snare comes back. So that's got that another just classic jazzy lo-fi feel to it. And then you've got your shakers, as I said, that are still on this third vertical row, and we've got the kicks going, which we have 2 other kicks, and these ones don't have the shaker layered on top, so it keeps the rhythm how I intended for just the shakers here and then the deep shaker right here. So these are just pure kicks on 8 and 12. But then you can hear that there's these 2 kicks here. So we've got kicks on 1, 8, 9, and 12. So it's already getting to a busier pattern, being that it's the chorus. And then the shaker on 15. So it's still, there's no fill or anything crazy happening for that pattern. And then you jump over here to the, what will be the second pattern. So there's really nothing too crazy. We've got those layered shaker kicks there. The same kicks right here and here. So 1, 8, 9, and 12 once again. You got your snare on 5 and 13 as always. You got that deep shaker hit on 2 again. And you got the open hi-hat. But you hear one other variation here. And that's that there's additional snare hits here on 15 and 16. It just adds that additional vibe that kind of helps it transition from pattern 1 to pattern 2, and then it's going back to the original chord, which we have a variation of on pattern 10. And these drums are the exact same as the first pattern, so I don't even need to look at them. But then we have the alternate final pattern, which has the kicks there, 4 and 8, 1 and 9, snares, but it has those double snares again, open hi-hat, not found here because we've got the shaker instead. So it lets us know, like, oh man, that normal hi-hat that we would have ringing out right there, it's not there anymore. It kind of draws us in like, oh, there was a variation that took place. This is going to serve to transition to a different pattern. Or it loops back around, right? And it allows time because the melody there does get a little busier, so that by pulling back the hi-hat, instead you're listening to the melody take place. Which, let's take a look at that now. So, pretty simple. It's a pretty busy melody though, but it's just kind of sticks to these vertical rows, so those eighth note grooves, but then you'll hear notes that are played in the second vertical row and the fourth vertical row, which are being swung. So you'll hear that vibe of especially this note. So you get these kind of, it's like tottering and teetering around. It's messing about. It's much more playful feeling, and these ones kind of hold it down as they're played straight. And this is oh my gosh, I use this pattern or these rhythms so much, I realized when I did this last time. So you got it on 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, and then 15. So if you want to ever have a similar rhythm, just follow those 1, 4. So all I really do is kind of make a Z. I go boom, 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 boom. Or you can do it on 16 too if you want. So it kind of gives it that weird kind of bouncing, dragging feel where there's 2 spaces between each note. So there's 2 steps that are missed every single time, which kind of adds this weird syncopation to it. And then it goes back. And then this time, very, very, very busy. You can see we got stuff going on here on 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, and 15. So but it's busy, but it's, listen to it. It doesn't have that much variation in notes. Which is the root of our key. So that's all that's going on with that melodic line and the bass. The bass is extremely busy. I love busy bass lines that kind of walk around, especially the chords that use the 1, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th usually my chords are 7th chords, or they're 6th chords or 9th chords. So I always want to accent or emphasize those additional notes like the 7th or the 9th or the 6th note, and you'll hear that in the bass lines as we go through it. So we got the standard just root note going. And then you hear that walking down, which is so that's a chord right there. We're just going 5th, 3rd, and then the root note. It sounds busy and crazy, but at the same time it's staying within the chord structure. And then if we look at the variation of the same first pattern, when it comes back around, you hear some busyness on the first few notes. So we do some walking on that first chord that plays out now. And that right there is going to be the 7th. It's the 7th note. So you get that fun kind of spiciness to it because it's not the root, it's a different note, and it kind of adds that jazziness. And the bottom half is the exact same as that first initial pattern. So let's go. So let me just play it out for you so you can hear the transition. So now let's take a look at that second pattern. Pretty simple, really. So these are all the root note, and then it jumps up. So that's the 3rd. So this note kind of accents a different color from the chord that you'll hear. It's the same chord being played, but it just feels different when I make this fake bass player, when I jump to the third instead of the root. It brings out a different color in the chord and adds variation, though I only am using 4 different chords for the samples. And then you've got the alternate, which is pretty similar in rhythm, except there's no change in hopping around or anything, just because the melody is so busy, and I just figured the ear needed a rest. So it's just jamming on the root. And throughout all of this, you've heard some of the notes are being held out longer than others for the bass line, as I've done in the past. I hold down a note and I usually just bring it to 1 so that it just stays only for that one step. So that is going to be it for that section. And then the final section is pretty simple. It's kind of like the outro of the chorus. So it's really nothing different. We just removed the melody and instead have put little chops from the bird samples. So if we just take a look at those in this first pattern, they're the exact same for every pattern. So they kind of have differences in pitch, and I thought that would be good for these offbeat hits. So this vertical row, as we've heard, is the it's that offbeat groove, and then these are accentuating that offbeat groove with the bird sounds. So it's pretty simple because that's going on. And I just wanted to showcase the bass line even more, just in case it was outshined by the melody in the first section. And I was like, do I add another melody to this section? And I was like, that would be way too busy. And I had to show restraint because lo-fi isn't supposed to be some crazy melodic chaos. It's supposed to be a lot chiller. So I just restrained and just went for my busy bass line, which is already probably breaking some rules in lo-fi. So let me just play it out for you guys so you can hear it. So that's going to do it for today. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down in the description below. And I have other tutorials here that you guys can check out if you want, or just my other pocket operator videos if you're trying to feel inspired in how to use yours. Please always leave any type of suggestions on how I can make these videos better. I want to make it easier for you all to learn this instrument because I love pocket operators. I think they're so much fun and they're pretty easy once you learn them. So I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. See ya.